Hi everyone, welcome to the Decentralized Voices podcast. My name is Daria and I'm happy to host Dr. Paul Dylan-Ennis as the guest for this episode. Paul is an expert in the field of blockchain and cryptocurrency. He's a lecturer and professor at University College Dublin in Ireland and has published numerous papers and articles on blockchain and its social, economic, and cultural implications. In this episode, we'll discuss blockchain education, Ethereum's place in the Web3 ecosystem, crypto Twitter drama, and the differences between Degens and Cypherpunks. Stay with us for the whole episode and don't forget to like it and subscribe to the podcast. Paul, I'm excited to have you today. Please share a bit about yourself.
So I'm a lecturer. That's my day job in University College Dublin, the College of Business. So not computer science, which I think a lot of people think, but good old-fashioned business students who love crypto, as you might imagine. I'm the author of Absolute Essentials of Ethereum, which is a book, just an introductory book to Ethereum. I do a bunch of things in the ecosystem as well. I'm on the Silviculture Council, this sort of informal entity which provides feedback, external feedback to the Ethereum Foundation about its direction. A Lido delegate, ZK Sync delegate, co-organizer of ETHDublin would be one of the more recent ones. And I used to write a lot of op-eds about crypto culture. That's, I think, how most people would know me, is from either posting on crypto Twitter or writing op-eds. These days, it's very hard to get op-eds because the media outlets, they prefer to do podcasts. We've kind of moved into a new era these days.
Yeah, thank you. That's why we're here on the podcast. How did you fall into this blockchain rabbit hole?
It's a longer story than most people, so this gives away my age a little bit, but I was interested in, I got first interested in crypto in 2012, so like relatively early, but not necessarily a strong member of the community. So I wasn't like an active Bitcoin contributor or, buying Bitcoin. Otherwise, I'd be living on a beach in Thailand or something instead of working. But I had friends who were interested in WikiLeaks. So I had friends who were interested in digital issues around like digital surveillance, those kind of topics. So they were on the edge of my group and they would mention the blockade to me. And then the other aspect that people talked about amongst my group would have been Silk Road. So just like a typical, so at the time I was finishing my PhD, so I was, still in the kind of college group. So this typical college kind of topics. And what I noticed from both stories, anytime I read up about them, was the mention of Bitcoin. So it's like, okay, there's something interesting here that's transcending these different countercultures. And so it piqued my interest. I've always been interested in subcultures and countercultures anyway. So whether that's urban exploration or graffiti or skateboarding or whatever, or music scenes, anything like that has always interested me. And to me, this is like a natural extension of that. It's like digital counterculture of some kind. And then when I start looking into it, so I went onto Bitcoin Talk around that time, so like 2012 type era, which means going to like the forum was the only place that crypto existed. There was just Bitcoin Talk. And I found it interesting because they were talking about political topics and political ideologies, which I'd never heard of before. So I'd never heard of libertarianism before Bitcoin. It doesn't exist, or it didn't exist in Ireland at the time. There was no libertarian that you might bump into. That person didn't exist. You could definitely meet them now at a Bitcoin meetup, but then it was very novel. And I did know a little bit about open source culture, but not cypherpunk, so not the real history of pure cypherpunk culture. So that was really intriguing to me. I start hanging around the forums, but I wasn't participating in the community in any kind of way. I was just doing what I always do, which is be a bit of a voyeur of culture. So I was just watching what they were up to. And I found it interesting that they weren't reflecting on themselves. Like they weren't aware of themselves as this novel community. They were just acting very naturally and pursuing their interests. So I was like, okay, this is like a nascent culture that I can kind of watch. And then I start getting involved a little bit in what was originally called Darkcoin, but then became Dash, and then also Litecoin. I really made my, like, say, bones in terms of actually figuring out how it works actually in the altcoin scenes, because I felt like I could actually contribute a little bit there. And this would have been very minor stuff like writing articles explaining how Litecoin works, how it's different from Bitcoin, stuff like that. And then, yeah, just over the years, morphed somehow into becoming my research focus. So I realized that this was an area that no other academic at the time was really focused on. Then later, of course, I did realize that there were other people, but I felt at the time no one else was. And so I said, okay, I'm going to focus my research on crypto. And then I'm also going to take an angle of being someone who approaches it from a cultural perspective, because well, and now that's commonly accepted. So we kind of accept that the cultural side is very important, the social layer being the term that people use. At that point, it was mostly assumed to be a financial or technical innovation. All the academic work that existed, very small amount of it at the time, but it was all focused on finance or technology. And I said, okay, what I'll do is I'll be the kind of culture person. Although these days that's become very normalized. I need to find something new because people are like, okay, we accept that. So yeah, basically, yeah, being interested in kind of niche subcultures. And then the same as everybody else, one day you wake up and you realize you're spending all your time obsessing over it and you don't remember what exactly happened.
Thanks for great explanation. What excites you the most about decentralized systems? Is it still about culture or something else?
Yeah, this is a complicated one for me because I'm not a ideologue about decentralization. I don't look at decentralization as just a good in and of itself. They have a conservative view of society, not like conservative politics, but a conservative view that what we mostly are going to find ourselves as individuals in some kind of like centralized structure or institution which has power over our lives. And that's probably an inevitability, especially at these kind of like late phase, very entrenched states, which are extremely powerful, etc. Like in a situation like this, I see decentralized subcultures, decentralized communities as almost like a necessary escape valve or necessary outside space where you can operate and still have a sense of autonomy, still have a sense of controlling your decisions. So I'm a believer that you should be able to operate in life with as little dependency on, say, the state as possible. So I kind of believe that we've, become a little bit overly dependent. We need like way too much permission to live, to do anything. You need like all kinds of bureaucracy and formal
Yeah.
documentation, etc. And I think this is anti-life. Like it's a kind of way of turning into someone who lives very safe. I think it makes you safe over time, and you feel that, and eventually you become completely enmeshed in it. So so in the like in a society like that, I think it is good then to have these decentralized countercultures that allow you to operate somewhat outside of the system. And so when that the centralized system you're living in is not necessarily authoritarian, it's more about the sense of freedom, not being so dependent, and not needing as much permission. But then in my more apocalyptic thinking, if you do end up in a regime where that switches and that centralization suddenly becomes more dangerous. So I read a lot about and I'm very interested in authoritarian regimes and history, and like sort of how like Nazi Germany is like kind of the
Yeah.
focus that I have at the moment, and how quickly these things can change and how people can be pulled into authoritarian thinking. I do see things like Bitcoin and Ethereum as probably extremely powerful tools of counter organizing in a society like that. So in one sense, I like the freedom that enables under the current centralization regime, which is not so authoritarian as to be suffocating. But I do also have this apocalyptic reading of could be very powerful for us to be able to organize these peer-to-peer networks, and especially to be able to send money if things change.
Okay, thank you. So, what do you like about Ethereum? Because you have tattoo with Ethereum, you participate in many Ethereum-related conferences, and obviously you wrote a book about Ethereum, and we'll discuss it a bit later today. So, what do you like about Ethereum?
Yeah, so as someone who grew up in Bitcoin almost, so I like for most of my actually at this point there's more Ethereum history than Bitcoin history, but for the first few years of my life as a crypto person, I was basically just a Bitcoiner because most people were Bitcoiners. And then you also had an interest in derivatives of Bitcoin, but they're very similar. There wasn't a huge amount of difference between being interested in Litecoin or Dash or a Dogecoin. They're just variations on the Bitcoin peer-to-peer cash or a now digital gold type model. The reason it's more that I fell out of Bitcoin culture and was looking for another avenue. So what I started to see over time, which is quite evident now, but the populist streak in Bitcoin, there's an Americanism, which like a sort of over the top Americanization of Bitcoin. So I started to see this maybe even like a little bit of chauvinistic sense of Bitcoin culture. which is expressed as maximalism. So the idea that Bitcoin is the only thing that matters, everything else is a scam.
Yes.
I stopped liking the Bitcoiners. I didn't want to be around Bitcoiners anymore and didn't see myself really fitting in as much. And what I noticed is that a lot of people that I'd known in the Bitcoin community who identified more strongly with the cypherpunk side of things had migrated over to Ethereum. I looked around and said, like, it's where are all the cypherpunks gone? All I see now are like libertarians who also seem to have this flirtation with like populist kind of politics. And it turns out the place that you would go to find this around 2015 and 16, what was Ethereum. I missed the beginning of Ethereum. I wasn't really paying attention to it. Something that's maybe difficult for people to imagine now, but there really was no difference between the Ethereum launch and any other altcoin launch. Like there was a whole bunch of other things that could have been Ethereum as well. And, you would have to have been, I think luck plays a big part in this. Like some people just recognized that there was something special about it, but broadly speaking, it wasn't something obvious, I would say. And then what I found, unlike in Ethereum culture that I enjoy, is that it's much more pluralistic. There's much more expressivity, so there's just more that you can do. It makes it much more interesting to analyze. If you look at the spectrum, one of the quirks of Ethereum is that it's not defined what it's for. Bitcoin, the white paper, peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Ethereum says a decentralized application and smart contract platform. It's very vague. It doesn't say the specific use case.
Yeah.
It says like build apps, build smart contracts. It's not defined in the Ethereum white paper. And then the first real definitions we get from Gavin Wood. So Gavin Wood is the one who comes up with the world computer. That's pretty ambiguous. It's a good metaphor. It's a good image, maybe a good analogy. People, well, Ethereum's the world computer, but it doesn't really tell you what the Ethereum society eventually is supposed to look like or what exactly you're supposed to be doing in Ethereum. Whereas in Bitcoin, there's maybe like a faith, like they have this idea of hyper Bitcoinization. We have the collapse of the fiat society and we transition over to the hyper Bitcoin kind of world. Whereas in Ethereum, what I like is the ambiguity, the question mark about the direction that we're supposed to be going in. I used to be frustrated by it, but I've come to learn that that's actually a really powerful aspect to it. So from a culture perspective, like from a researcher perspective, better to be researching a very pluralist culture, even though it can be very frustrating because they're so different. We've got all these different types, than researching a monolithic culture, which has decided what's right. Like the Bitcoiners have decided what's right. They know what it is. They know what they're against. And that makes them a little bit difficult to study. So if you read academic articles on Bitcoin, they always say the same thing. But then with Ethereum, you see all the academics are basically confused about what to say. And I think that's always a good thing. They come up all kinds of different conclusions. So like a multi-varied culture is a better thing to be looking at.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to mention two short things. First, that Ethereum is more welcoming than Bitcoin. So as you mentioned, Bitcoiners, they're more monolithic and like more closed. And the second one, Bitcoin can be perceived only in terms of crypto and in terms of investment or trade or something. And Ethereum is perceived in like two dimensions, directions for builders and for traders, like cryptocurrency and like technology, like something that can be basis for the apps, for platforms, for like different things. I think that more people can find something for them inside of the Ethereum ecosystem. So let's discuss your book, Absolute Essentials of Ethereum. It explores the social, cultural, and political values shared by blockchain communities. And it also covers different technical principles inside of the Ethereum ecosystem, like DAOs, DeFi, L2s, and many, many more. So first of all, I want to ask you, did your students in Ireland, did they read this book? And is it like part of their educational program?
Did they read it is something I can't answer. Should they have read it? Yes. So it is on the curriculum, and so it is assigned as a reading. It's like the main reading for the students. But I never actually know if they read it. It's also possible these days they just upload it to like an AI LMM and just like get the summary points, which I'm not even necessarily opposed to going forward in the future. But so the book itself is just my lectures. So what happened is I basically got an inquiry about writing a book about crypto. like an introductory book about crypto in general. And I didn't want to do that because I felt like it was like if I just focused on crypto broadly, I would treat every subject very superficially. So if you only have one chapter on Bitcoin, one chapter on Ethereum, and then one chapter on centralized exchanges, like you can imagine yourself getting spread very thin very quickly. And I knew also that if they asked me to do that, they would want me just to explain things technically, right? How does Bitcoin work technically? Maybe throw in some stuff at the end about finance, some stuff at the end about apps. But those books, they almost invariably are tech focused or only tech focused. They just tell you if you grab these. There's not many books on Ethereum, but if you grab them, they're all technical books for the most part, except the history ones from Laura Shin and Camilla Russo. And then and same situation with Bitcoin, except Bitcoin has actually some polemical books, so some books where people are arguing for different sides. So I didn't want to do that, but I did say to them I would be happy to do a book which just takes my lectures, which have existed for a while. So I started teaching these classes in 2016-ish. And so the lectures are very done. They don't need much to be done to them, except every year I just need to add in what happened in Pectra or something like that.
Yeah.
And the way that I teach is I start off with Bitcoin, but then I spend most of the time on Ethereum, and I tell the students, it's not that I think you should be learning only Ethereum, but just if you understand one blockchain well, you can understand all of the rest of them. So I see it as get deep into one of them. So, if you actually are into Bitcoin, we're going to learn about Ethereum, and then you just go off and learn about Bitcoin. Just say, okay, swap out proof of stake for proof of work, and same for all the other niche areas. So, so each chapter is basically like, week 1, week 2, week 3 that the students are supposed to look at. So it's very, very useful. So you're giving the lecture, and then you can also tell if you're more interested in this topic, it's in the book. So that means I don't have to have everything in the slides. That's very helpful when you're teaching. The worst sin of, as an academic, I think, and you can see this when people are giving talks, is where they have like lots and lots of text, like blocks of text. Because what people do is they start reading the text and they stop listening to you. So you have to be very careful about what you put up there. So that's what the book is trying to do. And one of the big decisions in there is to include chapters talking about the governance, talking about the culture, mentioning things that would never normally get put into these books. That we do have cypherpunks and regens and degens, and that we're talking about the execution layer and the consensus layer. But it's important to know that this is ultimately upgraded and maintained by people. That there is a huge element to what's happening. And another aspect of it is like leaving little warnings about the dangers. I think that was a very conscious decision as well. So whenever I introduced anything exciting, to also say, well, here's an event where it was
Yeah. Okay, so do you think such books like yours and other books, do they work better to study blockchains than, for example, crypto Twitter research? So where students and where like young people, newcomers, should learn about blockchain?
This is an interesting question because I think, and this is another example where you probably wouldn't really have this kind of sense of things unless you've had to like teach for a very long time, which is if the way that people really learn is not by you finding the best mechanism or the best media that you think will work, but really getting them interested and getting them passionate, and then they use whatever tool they want. So it could be the case that some of your students are very interested, are old-fashioned, and this is something you actually see today, where you have students who are kind of like consciously against AI. It's not a big amount of students. It's like usually a kind of more traditionalist kind of person. They love reading books, and for that person, like the books is the excitement, and you tell them to go to the library, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm actually going to go and take books off the shelves. And for that person, it will definitely be a book. And then there are other people where what's going to work for them, it could be like AI itself. Like, so there are some people who are, you can see students who are very interested, and they want to be the person who like gets AI very, very early and ahead of everybody else. And so you can kind of encourage them to do dialogues with Chat GPT, and treat it as like some sort of discussion where you're learning with it, which is becoming this new phenomenon. It's like a buddy that they use to bounce ideas back and forth on. And then there are other students, and this is actually for crypto, I would say the dominant student that I find in my class who are actually really good, the ones who do the best. They learn from listening to different podcasts. They learn from engaging in crypto Twitter. So they join crypto Twitter, which I encourage them to do under a pseudonym, a throwaway pseudonym that they can just abandon once they learn how to make good tweets. And then, for them, it's about immersion. So I encourage them to get on crypto Twitter, follow a bunch of people, see what kind of things they're talking about, and then listen to Bankless and the Bell Curve and Unchained, and just hear these different terms and then try to identify terms and then begin looking for them. So so in my experience, it's more about finding what works for them, which usually you'll get just by they come up after class or they send you an email, and you have to figure out what type of personality they are. There are archetypes of students that you tend to find. The harder question is, how do you ignite the passion that gets them to then pick some kind of medium? That's the really difficult question. That's like the $1 billion question that if someone in crypto could figure out, we would like that. That's like our main meta problem that we're always worried about. Like, how do we get retail to come into crypto? And I don't know how to do that. I think if I knew how to do that, then I'd be considered some kind of like genius of crypto. But it is, I think what we all kind of do know is that it is an issue, and we also know that we're not doing it like what we're doing currently is not the best mechanism, which is we have conferences. The real way somebody would probably realistically pick up a passion for crypto these days is they go to an event and then they enjoy being around the people at the event. And the problem with our events is, of course, they're very insular. They assume a lot of knowledge. So if you turn up and you're looking at the talks, you have no idea what anybody is talking about. So you're listening to someone talk about public goods and DAOs. You don't know what DAOs are or public goods. So the whole thing is incomprehensible to you. And then there are all these booths for businesses, which you can't tell like what's legitimate or what's not. So I think a big part of it is we should probably be turning up at different events. We should be at like we could do it less of our own events and more outreach at other kind of events. But at the same time, I don't try to push these things too much, because I do think there's a certain like reality of incentives. I don't like the kind of getting too into like markets and incentives, but it is clear that the conference is a product of crypto. Like it is part of the appeal. And in many ways, you could argue that crypto is the conferences. Like that is really the self-sustaining aspect of it. It keeps people locked in. It gives them a sense of purpose, of breaking up their year. So in that way, I mean, this is a point that I've made a few times, which is that crypto is a subculture that can't really accept it's a subculture, that we're more like, some industry that sells kitchens, and you're like a specialist in selling kitchens and you go to the kitchen industry conference. Or maybe you're a furry. This is the other one I like to put out, because it's like another group that's hated by everybody, misunderstood. But what do? They go to these conferences, and then like every so often a few people join. And I think that's kind of our situation, but we don't really want to accept that we're probably not going to have this mainstream.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I want to continue this topic with the next question, actually, about your opinion in your article for Blockworks, where you addressed the risks and potential of relying on Twitter, on crypto Twitter X. So first of all, I agree with you, because it's very closed ecosystem that develops. It's like the soup that boiling inside and doesn't go outside. So, and every day it seems to get worse and worse and worse. This crypto drama, it becomes toxic, to be honest. You mentioned the platforms like Lens, like Farcaster, Console, and other niche platforms, but they are niche and they are not open to to broader audience, to people, to my mom, for example. So my question to you, first of all, what do you think about the current state of crypto Twitter? And the next question is, how can we attract people to these decentralized platforms, like alternatives to Twitter, if we can?
Yeah, I've definitely come to an acceptance of crypto Twitter. I guess that article was maybe, I always think it's worth trying. Just you try and see if you can, maybe if I write this article, a few other people might write an article, and maybe it gets to the podcast and encourages kind of something. But very often these things don't work. They're shots in the dark. So I'm more and more accepting of we are like existentially trapped on crypto Twitter. There's a good word in English that isn't very common, miasma. So it's like being in a kind of a pollution of some sort that it's just like
Yeah.
surrounding everything. It's like an atmosphere. I do think it's a very negative place. I think it's a strange place. I mean, psychologically, if you just look at, like, if you sat back and could watch yourself on, never mind crypto Twitter, but just Twitter, you would say, like, what are you doing? Like, this is just nuts. Like, this is all garbage. It's not helping you whatsoever. And really the only positive thing that comes from it is the connection with people, and then like through like DMs and stuff like that. And you do have like some friends, like some parasocial relationships with people as they talk about on YouTube. But it's a kind of facsimile of like human relationships. It's not the real thing. And then that's where the conferences come in, because the conferences they kind of keep the social media alive, because you do feel eventually you will meet these people in person, and you need to be kind of connected on crypto Twitter. I've accepted it as like we are trapped there, and the only way we'll ever get off crypto Twitter is if there's some external shock. So, you know, the company itself collapses because of like mismanagement from Elon or something,
Oh
or
my God, it's
possibly like just running out of money or revenue. You know, it has to be that crypto Twitter itself collapses, Twitter itself collapses, as opposed to crypto Twitter migrates off. I ask my students at the end of the year, like the ones who do really well, I always ask them, because they're the ones who usually come talk to you, like they're still interested. And I always ask them, so from your perspective, what's one of the things that you noticed? And the most common thing that they tell me is, like, why is everything on Twitter? I try to look on TikTok, I try to look on Instagram, the ones that they use, and Snapchat is the other one that's popular in Ireland. And they say, when I looked at the videos, they're like really low quality, like really bad compared to like what we were looking at on like the YouTube podcasts or like
yeah,
on Twitter.
yeah.
And they were saying it's like basically just like scam stuff, going on. So that's another issue of our insularity and the outreach question. The crypto Twitter is our conference. It's like the annual non-stop 24/7 conference, and we don't go to the other places because we're too comfortable and familiar with CT. And I mean, my main focus for my talks that are kind of coming up in the summer, so when I go to like DAppCon and Protocol Berg and stuff like that, is actually going to be on the effect of crypto Twitter on how we know, like what we now consider important content, and the way messages are framed. So this is most people would know this Marshall McLuhan quote, "The medium is the message." But so I'm interested in, say, McLuhan's students, people like Neil Postman, etc. And they're the people who kind of pushed this idea a little bit further. And most of their theorizing is about this idea of like if you have like a situation where your thoughts are compressed into 140 characters, or maybe you can pay, which is interesting on itself, you can pay to make it longer. But if you're breaking up your thoughts mostly into these like kind of character limits, like it is going to begin shaping like the kinds of arguments that are considered important, concise, and clear, and travel well across the medium itself, and reaches the overall community, which at this point is crypto Twitter. The social layer, as much as I hate to say it, more or less is defined by what happens on CT. And you can see the effect of this. So we're at the point where we have the evidence. So when we had the changes at the Ethereum Foundation, the new leaderships,
Yeah.
the kind of Aya has to go, and we need like a muscular Tomas type character. And they need to talk less about Cypherpunk. They need to think of Ethereum as a protocol instead of a product. All of this comes from crypto Twitter. That's a faction, a very powerful, influential faction that I think maybe the kind of core devs and the OG cypherpunks have not been quite prepared to reckon with. That it's happened, that now they are the influential voice. They drive what Ethereum is. The ETH economy, like the people who think like it's, just get the price of ETH up. It doesn't matter what it costs us. Like let's just become a company that means like ETH is worth 10,000, right? That kind of thinking. And that is, I think, where the medium needs to be kind of examined. So like, it's not just that crypto Twitter is toxic, but it forms what's important to people. And it's escaping crypto Twitter and now turning up in like the all core devs call. You can see the kind of mindset and the kind of arguments in the governance layer itself. And that's something new that we haven't really reckoned with. So we can't escape CT, but we really should be examining more its effect on what Ethereum is.
What do you think about new decentralized social platforms like Lens, Warpcast? Are they attracting many people, or they are still niche and still in this like MVP version?
If crypto Twitter and Ethereum is like a branch of music, let's say it's metal, then Farcaster and Lens are like black metal and speed metal or something. It's like you really have to kind of be in it, like really into like something to end up in these places. But they do have fairly like they don't have like a huge amount of users, obviously, like relative to CT, but they have like they are examples of functioning decentralized applications in Ethereum, of which we don't have many to kind of brag about. I am always a little bit disappointed when people dunk on, say, Lens or dunk on Farcaster, especially when they're doing it, of course, on crypto Twitter, because it's like that's actually what we are supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be using our own applications that are built on layer 2. So like the background infrastructure of these platforms is like Optimism and zk Sync, etc. So they should be admired more. I think it's a fault of ours. Falverse is another example of this kind of like niche product that you'll see more like Cypherpunk true believers use. I do look at it as they're micro genres of crypto, but they are actually more authentic. And so I'm a little bit more on their side against the sort of market user revenue person who's just saying from afar, like, you're all idiots. Like, what are you even talking on Farcaster? I'm talking on Lens. And I think it's the other way around. It's like, look at what are you doing talking on CT? Like, we're the idiots, like including myself here as a CT kind of like addict who's trapped by my follower account. Because like, it's like, oh, we've got so many followers here. Will I ever be able to build it up? I'm very, very sympathetic to them, and I think we often shoot ourselves in the foot, and we don't defend our own achievements very well. That's a flaw in the crypto character. We're treating Farcaster and Lens almost as if they're like the junk scam projects. That's not the case. These are the legitimate decentralized applications that we were supposed to be building. You're supposed to be on Farcaster and Fileverse, etc. That should be the norm.
I agree with you, and actually I use both. I'm not actively use them, of course, because I stuck when I understand that I should post it on X, on LinkedIn, for example, because I have my active LinkedIn account. I have my Instagram account for my friends, and I should post sometimes photos there. And also I have Lens and Warpcast. I understand that I have to post on all these platforms and spend much time posting the same things, or even not the same, but like to recreate the content and like make it more tailored to the platform. And oh my God, it's so overwhelming. Maybe we'll see this time when people decide what works for them better, for example, and focus more. And when they decide that, okay, crypto Twitter is not okay, so I really want and I really need to find alternative platform to share and focus there. Despite AI existing for years, its widespread use was catalyzed by Chat GPT, obviously. So what could be the point of no return for mass adoption of blockchain? What do you think?
I guess I've probably given the game away a little bit early on in my sense of we're a subculture that doesn't accept its subcultural status. I mean, in a way, we've already achieved a kind of mass adoption. If I say to my my parents, at least, so not my grandparents, but to not my grandparents who are, but let's say if you're a younger person than parents, if you say to someone who's in their 70s or 80s or something like that, and you say, what is Bitcoin? They wouldn't have any idea, right? That's kind of like guaranteed. But if you get down to say 60 or so, 50 or 60, they know what Bitcoin is. They've heard of Bitcoin, and they have probably heard of, say, they might have heard of XRP, or they might have heard of Solana or something like that. And then if you go further down, like, you can definitely presume that a lot of people definitely know what Bitcoin is. In fact, guaranteed, because Bitcoin is a cultural marker. It turns up in movies, it turns up in films, usually in a negative kind of way. It's like something to do with hackers or whatever. But or maybe just to introduce that a character made a lot of money in a mysterious way. You just say like, oh, well, he made like doing Bitcoin, Bitcoin is like already psychologically accepted, culturally accepted as a thing. It's adopted in that kind of way. Ethereum is a little bit kind of unusual because actually I find that a lot more people know about things like XRP and Solana than Ethereum. Ethereum is sort of like skipped over in a lot of people's minds. And I think that's a lot to do with when they were investing. They look at Bitcoin as the one that they missed out on. And then they kind of go down the list and they skip past Ethereum because that's like too expensive. And they kind of look at like XRP, they see first. I think, we forget that if you go to most people, not most people, but a lot of people these days will have their, challenger bank app. Like we have one in Ireland, it's called Revolut. I'm sure that, various different versions of this. So basically just like instead of having a bank account, you have this like little payment app, which does most of the same functions. And one of the things it allows you to do almost invariably is trade crypto. And it'll have like all these like obscure assets that you never even think about as a crypto person, but they're all in there. Things like EOS that you haven't thought about in years are in there. So and often people as well will have like bought some of them. So like my sister is into Solana, like she doesn't know anything about Solana, but she just looks at the price of it, and she'll say to me every so often, "What's happening in Solana? Should I keep my Solana?" Like, that kind of thing. So it's more like a small fun thing for her. She's never going to like sit down and learn about like proof of history or something like that.
Yeah.
So in a way, it's much more, let's say, known than people expect. It is adopted in some kind of way. However, I think there is a sense in which it is like that idea of some people are specialists in selling kitchens and they have kitchen conferences. Crypto is a subgenre of finance, and that's probably where it lives forever. It's like a specific type of stock. Like, so if there's some kind of specialist type of stock trading or financial derivatives that you learn about when you join a large company and you become the person that's your emphasis. Like crypto is just one of them. If you look at CNBC, if you look at CNN and they or Bloomberg and they do their discussions, like crypto just comes in at the end. It's almost like sports. So when you're listening to the news, you listen to the serious stuff, and then at the end they throw you into sports, maybe some entertainment. And in business TV, which I kind of keep on in the background out of interest of this, because I'm in the business school, so I'm supposed to keep up about it. I always know now that they'll start talking about Bitcoin at the end. Like, okay, right, we're near the end of the show, Bitcoin will come up or Ethereum will come up. Every so often they'll have a guest on. So in that sense, this is that maybe like a counterintuitive thing to say, but we are mainstream already. We're just not mainstream in the way we want it to be. So like Marlowe in The Wire, we want it to be one way, but it's the other way. It's like people have seen what we're selling and they've said, this is okay, this is going in a category over here of subgenre, microeconomy. That's it. You'll pick up new people, especially now in the bull market. But don't expect Bitcoin to be like. I don't expect people to be like using Bitcoin like kind of in society itself. I think it's going to have those like really interesting like use cases in the sense of like governments will stockpile it for various use cases. I imagine actually many governments stockpile it probably for hacking purposes or like kind of like CIA operations and stuff, whatever they're doing with it. And Monero, I imagine, is probably being stockpiled for sure. So it will be like always like in the mix, like always part of the story, but not in the way that we hoped. And in a way, like what we kind of hope for is like a little bit delusional, right? That everybody is like constantly, like everybody's going around using Bitcoin and ETH to buy things, even though it's like this crazy volatile market that we love as well. And then also that everybody would be using these decentralized applications, even though we ourselves don't use them. So like, why would they use them if we don't use them? So like, we have to kind of cap our expectations on that kind of thing. So that would be my rant against people's calling for one thing and then like acting in a completely different way.
Yeah. I really like your answer, and I think it should be put on the title. Like we are already have this adoption, but not in the way we expect and not in the way we would like. So let's talk about Web3 cultures. I want to ask you about the difference between cypherpunks, Degens, and Regens. Like what cultural identity resonates with you?
Yeah, good question. I think most people would say automatically cypherpunk because I am often defending cypherpunk or posting, maybe not like all the time, but I do try to bring it up maybe more than most people. The reason I do that is because I do believe that there is like I find myself like defending cypherpunk in the way that a family member might defend like their own family member, as in like you can make fun of crypto, but if someone from the outside like kind of makes fun of them, then all of a sudden like you're defending them. And I feel like cypherpunk is something where it's not like I really kind of sit around like reading cypherpunk material all day. In fact, that's kind of true of most cypherpunks. You'll notice like they're not super, they usually have like other interests, right? But they understand that those fundamental core principles are like not are like they're not just incidental, that they are like, without them it really becomes meaningless. Like the cypherpunk values, like crypto sans cypherpunk, you can see this in, say, pump.fun. Like that's what pump.fun is. It's
Yeah.
crypto stripped of like cypherpunk values, and that's a depressing nihilistic kind of experience. So for me, they're like inviolable values that should be the foundation. So say decentralization, which I understand as authority should be spread as widely as possible. Which doesn't mean that like there isn't points of centralization in the system, but that's like I see it as a polycentric system. It's like
Mm-hmm.
just different stakeholder groups working together as best they can. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but at least it's better than pure centralization. Permissionlessness, I think, is a kind of a key one, right? So we don't need anyone's authority to do things. Fitting into my earlier discussion, that life, like the least amount of permission you need to do things is like a good quality of life, or at least for
Yeah.
me, that's how I think about it. And then credible neutrality. So like all transactions are equal in the eyes of the blockchain. And like just on principle, that seems almost to be like that's like a metaphysical thing. It's just like we have no judgment about what the chain accepts. And then credible neutrality, just Vitalik's term for what we build shouldn't favor anyone in particular, which I think is just a noble concept. Like whatever you're
Mm-hmm.
building shouldn't kind of like favor different stakeholders. Now, so I identify with those values as giving meaning to what we're doing. So if we're trying to create a technology which enables more freedom for ourselves, and then I should note here that I don't see blockchain change as like freeing everybody in some kind of way. I don't have this, like that earlier thing about being like conservative in the sense of I don't kind of imagine revolutionary things happening. I don't see blockchains in that kind of way. But for our specific trans-global fraternity of cypherpunky kind of people, and many of the cypherpunks in this world, in the blockchain community, are kind of like unconscious cypherpunks. So they're kind of like benefiting from the cypherpunk values being embedded in the protocols, even though they themselves maybe like kind of are dismissive of them or think they're like old fashioned and they're only interested in Degen kind of stuff. But it's like the only reason that Degen stuff is enabled is because of the permissionless baked into that chain. Without that, you have nothing. So I see it as these values are like creating the countercultural, the agorist space that gives it kind of like a purpose, but also like pragmatically downstream, it's enabling the kind of activities that are opening the sense of freedom. With that sense of freedom being very not being like very romantic or anything, just kind of like a strategic, decent amount of freedom. Given the world that we're living in, like it's better than like maybe what we would have had without the blockchains.
Yeah.
And I do think that's true. Like without these chains, we would all be like, we would have nothing like to kind of counter the let's say the financial system and Web 2. So I identify with cypherpunk, but I also know that you can't make people cypherpunks. I know it's fruitless to try. You can introduce them to cypherpunk, but I've learned over the years that it's like absolutely pointless trying to convince people, even if they're using a cypherpunk chain like Bitcoin or Ethereum. You can't do it. So to me, a degen is like I would have a harsher definition than a lot of people. I know a lot of people embrace degen. It's like that part of you who just likes to like play around and like, do things on markets. And I do that myself, the same as anybody else. But the problem for me is that degen is the dominant culture now. So cypherpunk is the minority sport. You can find it amongst the core devs. You can find it in like a Web3 privacy, and you can find it like a kind of like different aspects. So in the little circle here called cypherpunk, everything else is like degen, and it's within like, this goes back to the medium is the message kind of issue of crypto Twitter. Like if everybody's a degen, then it's very difficult for the minority kind of culture to push back against calls to, okay, maybe we should like centralize a bit more. You can see this with calls of leading the EF, like basically like, turn it into a company, turn Ethereum into a company. Yeah, degen I think is fine, but if there's only degen, and that's possible, right? The cypherpunks could die out. Like if you imagine 20, 30, 40 years, there's no cypherpunks around. It's just all degens, and they'll just say, you know what, we'll just kind of like that. That's always a possibility. And regens I like. I'm sympathetic to optimists, and I do this. I just amn't one myself. I can't do it. But I love people who are like that. So kind of like this idea of like, it's a positive thing. It's going to like the transparency of the chain is going to allow us to coordinate. And then like, yes, in a way, but like, it's also like it kind of leaves out the danger, I guess, a little bit, it kind of. a bit too positive sometimes.
Let's talk about blockchain community in Ireland. So you mentioned that you now are co-organizing Ethereum Dublin, and I'm sure that you were like one of first people who brought a blockchain and Ethereum to Ireland. So can you share your experience of organizing ETHDublin and maybe other events in Ireland? And can you tell more about Irish blockchain community?
Yeah, so I'll work kind of backwards from like ETHDublin to Blockchain Association of Ireland. Like ETHDublin, so I'm just a co-organizer, so not like a founding member or anything like that. So this was founded by Caelan Walsh, Ryan Kemp, and Alejandro Gutierrez. So this is the dream team, and they organized all of this without kind of like, I'd never even heard it was going on until they invited me to speak at one of them. So like that's how out of touch with the local scene I was. I'd basically given up on the local scene in Ireland by the time ETHDublin came around, because it's always been a struggle. There hasn't really been there hasn't really been people around who are deadly serious about like, putting on a conference, like real Ethereum true believers who wanted people to come to Ireland and experience it and to grow the ecosystem. And that's what those three people managed to do. And they've got this team as well that they've kind of pulled in. And it's pretty remarkable because ETHDublin, when I first went the first year, so since I'm a co-organizer now, I feel I could say this, but when I first went, I was like, this is really like a bunch of people organizing an Ethereum conference where they may not really understand like how an Ethereum conference should look like. And what they were modeling it on actually was the Blockchain Association of Ireland conference. So they would have like a few keynotes and then some panels. Whereas, like an Ethereum conference is more like you have like a cluster of talks, you have some panels, cluster of talks, etc. So so when I went, I gave a talk, and it was like a kind of a small enough kind of event. But when I went, you could see that that first event, like they learned everything they needed to know. And that's how you get this, like by the time we get to the one they're having this year, it's like Vitalik and Stani and it's like everybody like is kind of coming. So it only took like one event for them to kind of figure out like what needs to be done. And then my job really is just the agenda. So I'm the one who kind of like sends out emails sends DMs to people and says like, please come to ETHDublin, that kind of thing. Although it does get, at this point, that's no longer really going to be I don't think it's going to be necessary to do that in the future, but in the past it has been. So now the scene is pretty robust. It's like that conference is going to be pretty exciting. It's gone from something quite, like, I would say when the first one that I went to was like relatively a small event, to what now feels like a proper, real Ethereum conference over the space of, I think this is only the third one. So, that leap has been huge. And then prior to ETHDublin, there was the Blockchain Association of Ireland. It still exists now. And as I mentioned, like the first ETHDublin was kind of modeled a little bit, I think, on Blockchain Ireland's approach. And the reason why I didn't think that worked, and kind of like when I came in, this was the one thing that if I contributed anything, they do everything, like they do all the serious stuff. But if I contributed anything to ETHDublin, it was to say, let's make it less like the Blockchain Association event and more like an Ethereum event. Because Blockchain Association of Ireland, even though I was a founding member way back in 2015. So another person people might know is Rachel Rose O'Leary. So she's another Blockchain Association of Ireland founder. But there was only a few of us. It was very like 5 of us, I think, that were really kind of like trying to run it. And we would put on events every so often, and we would try to give talks, and it was always really, really small. I mean, like depressingly small. And then it kind of, I wouldn't say, what we're going to say makes it sound like there was some kind of battle for like Blockchain Association of Ireland, but there wasn't. We kind of got pushed out, but more based on the fact that we were like not really doing as much as the people who are coming in. So eventually we started to get people like Deloitte coming in, like the more the companies start coming in during the blockchain, not Bitcoin era. And when they came along, like we suddenly looked like these weirdo Bitcoiners and stuff like that. So we got like pushed out, but not in a way where it was like some kind of battle over its soul. They were just like better at like organizing stuff, and then we drifted off. So yeah, now it still exists, and now like it's like ETHDublin, and then the blockchain conference is on the like the day or two after. So it's like all runs into each other. So we have our own blockchain week, I guess you could say, like Berlin Blockchain Week or something like that.
Yeah. Next week, I will be interviewing Callan, and we'll talk more about ETHDublin and what actually they did to attract people, but now we know what they did. They invited you to help with the agenda and everything from the speaker side.
Yeah, although again, just to stress, like, they are the everything useful in terms of like actually kind of like structuring things, like, and kind of putting on events and like like making sure speakers know where they are, all that kind of thing. That's everybody else. So I'm the DMer in chief. I think is probably the way of putting it.
Paul, thank you very much for this great conversation. It was super insightful, and for me, and I'm sure for all our listeners and viewers of this episode. I will leave all your links under this episode so people can go and follow you and see what's happening in Ireland with your research and with everything around blockchain and Ethereum. If you want to add something, please do.
Yeah, just come to ETHDublin.